Hey everyone, thank you for joining. We're going to wait just a couple seconds here for folks to join, and then we'll get started. All right, great to see so many of you here, and thank you for taking the time to join us today. So my name is Rajen Sheth, and I am the CEO and founder of Kyron Learning, and we're going to talk a little bit today about what are some of the lessons that we have learned in driving learning outcomes with AI? How can you make AI a great learning tool? And so I'm going to give you a little bit of background on this to start off with. So, what I want you to be able to take away from this is to learn what really works when using AI to improve learning outcomes. And what we've distilled it down into is about 10 different lessons that we've learned from. So, we've been trying to do this for about 3.5 years, working with a variety of institutions in higher education and previously in K through 12. And we've learned a lot of different lessons. And we've learned that AI inherently by itself is actually not a great learning tool, but we've learned what we can do to actually make it a great learning tool. So we're going to share some of the lessons that we've learned from the various deployments that we've done. And we're in a very interesting moment, as I know many of you know right now, that this is a very interesting moment with AI. It is kind of like 1993 when the first web browser came out, that all of a sudden everybody in the world is getting access to AI, and the whole world is shifting in terms of how things operate as a result of that. And this is a huge moment in higher education in particular. And we're hearing from more and more and more institutions where AI is becoming a key part of everyone's strategy. However, we're only starting to figure out how to best use AI. And so far, most AI, particularly with students, is used to generate content, to answer questions, to automate academic tasks for institutions. And so we can go a lot farther beyond that. Can we get to the dream of making sure that every single person gets the education that they need, gets the personal attention that they need to be able to succeed in college? And that's really what we think AI can be all about. So the question we're going to explore today is, what does AI actually look like when it's designed for learning outcomes? And I'm going to take you through some of the principles that we've been thinking of, and many of which we've learned by trial and error to try to figure out what makes sense. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background about myself and to give you an idea of kind of where I'm coming from. So Kyron Learning is a public benefit company. We've been focused on how we can bring about better equitable access to high quality learning to more students, working with institutions to do this. And that's really what we've been doing over the course of the last 3.5 years. Previous to that, I was at Google for about 17 years, and led a variety of different initiatives at Google in education as well as enterprise. In my last 5 years there, I was VP of AI for Google Cloud, and so helped build out and lead Google's AI platform that is now things like Gemini, and then in addition to that, the various industry solutions that we built for various industries to figure out how we can help different industries take advantage of AI. But there were a couple of things that I noticed at that time. One, there's a lot that we can do with AI to drive social good. And so I left Google to start this public benefit company to focus on how AI can really help education. And the second is that AI was actually not being designed for learning. I was there when we were designing the early versions of Gemini. And what was interesting is that a lot of it was designed around information retrieval and question answering more than anything. How can you make it such that people can get information more quickly than they are getting right now, or get the specific information they need more quickly than they're getting it right now? That's really the design point around large language models. It's not designed for the kind of conversation that you would have if you were a teacher sitting down with a student. And so that's the thing that really sparked me to think about, how can we build something better and how can we evolve it as AI is evolving? So the shift that we need, that we found, is that most students are using AI to get answers. But what we need to do is figure out how do we drive students to understanding and not getting the answers. In fact, if they just get the answers from AI, in many cases that actually leads to very superficial understanding and cognitive decline. How can we make sure that they actually really grasp the concept? How can we be there the same way that an instructor in a class would be if they could sit down with every student? How can we extend that instructor such that they can be able to bring better learning to all of their students? That's how we really need to drive understanding. And so, in that process, over the last 3 years, we've learned 10 really interesting lessons for how to do that with AI. And I'm going to take you through what we've learned and show you some examples of this as well. The first one, which we really started with back in 2022, was we ask the question, we don't wait for the student to ask the question. Um, the AI should be the thing that guides the conversation as opposed to being a question answering tool. If you think about it, if a teacher comes in and sits next to you and you're struggling with a concept, they're not just going to wait there for you to ask a question. They're going to help you. They're going to explain concepts to you. They're going to ask you the right question that puts you into that zone of proximal development, and really kind of gives you the ability to talk through something to get to understand. And so what we found is that sure enough, about 75% of students, they're not only coming to us, but this is proven in studies, is that 75% of students actually don't know what question to ask. They don't know the concept well enough to be able to ask or formulate a question. And so by us asking the right question, we can put them into a place where it actually surfaces misconceptions. We can check for their understanding, we can guide their thinking, and we can get them to understanding, just like what an instructor would do if they were sitting down with a student. This is the concept of active learning that is well researched, and it reduces failures by about 55%. And so the AI needs to be designed to do this, figure out what is the right question to ask the student and to guide them towards the answer. The second thing is we want to make learning visual. Having a chatbot that just gives you text really isn't good enough. And again, think about your experience sitting down with a great instructor or a great teacher. They're going to draw things on a whiteboard, they're going to use visuals, they're going to communicate the concept to you, and AI should do the same. And what we're finding is that by doing that, visuals are reducing the cognitive load on the student. They actually have multiple places where they're getting that information. They're listening to an explanation, but they're also seeing that. And as a result of that, they're able to understand the concept in a much shorter amount of time with much more fidelity than if we just talk to them or if we just give them text around it. And so this has been a key part that we've really focused on from the very beginning. How can we make it a visual experience? Also, the other part of this is that that engages the student. And we're finding that as a result of that, we're able to engage the student much better than they're engaging with a lot of other material that they have right now too. The third part is that safety is non-negotiable. We need to set up the right guardrails such that you can have the right conversation. This is one of the biggest issues with AI right now, is that if you just go to a large language model, to a ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude, it can go off topic very easily. And it really kind of follows where the user wants to go. And so it goes off topic. It can also introduce incorrect information, and it could potentially even surface inappropriate content. And so these are the kinds of things that a student can get into if they're just using a large language model by itself. However, in order to really learn, we want to keep the discussions very focused and accurate and then aligned with instruction. And so we've built a system with a variety of guardrails around it to make sure that we can have that focused discussion. Now, where it starts is this idea of us asking the question. Because we're asking the question, we know the topic of the conversation and we can talk to the student in the right way. And we're finding that by doing that, we can actually much more easily guardrail the AI than if we were to have it be much more general. And that's actually helping students have kind of a much more focused conversation that actually leads them to better understanding. The fourth lesson that we've really figured out is that this should be pretty obvious, but we should build on learning science, and we should use AI to reinforce the way that people already know how to learn. One of the things that is true about AI in education right now is there aren't a lot of data points. If you think about it, AI has really only been out there for about 3+ years right now. And in addition to that, not only has it only been out there for a short amount of time, but to do the kind of research that you need to figure out the kinds of results does take a good amount of time. However, there is a ton of research already there with learning science, and we already know the kinds of principles of what works with learning science and what doesn't. So what we can do is we can mirror those in the AI, and by doing that, we can benefit from that research and benefit from things that are really tried and true. And so some of the things that we've been focusing on is that we know with learning science that effective instruction includes explanation, it includes guided practice, it includes feedback, and it includes reinforcement. And so we've taken some of the best research that's out there and actually codified that into the AI. And that's made a huge difference for our students. I'll be honest with you that when we first started this, we didn't do that. We tried to rely on the AI to come up with the right thing. And we realized that that actually wasn't what was driving results. One of the really interesting moves we made, though, is that our organization is half teachers and half technologists. And we actually took a lot of our teachers and had them actually start writing the AI prompts and be the prompt engineers. That made a massive difference. We actually then measured what kind of a difference that made, and we found that that made a huge difference for us in terms of quality and in terms of adhering to learning science. And so, what we're able to now do is that we can make sure that that learning science is actually codified into the AI because the people that are actually doing it are the educators that know about that learning science. The fifth lesson is to really align this with curriculum. We had a bunch of debates in the early days about, okay, should we teach math a particular way that we think is the best way to teach math? Or should we teach, you know, English in a particular way that we know we think is the right way? Now, the problem with that is that even if it is a better way, it's not how students are learning it necessarily in their class. And so, what we want to be able to do is reinforce what they're learning in their class to make it such that they're able to understand it, rather than trying to have them learn one version of that topic in class and learn another version through AI. Now, if you go to a large language model and you just ask it questions, it's not going to know the context of how you're learning things in your class. And it's just going to go to what it can default to. And so that ends up confusing students. And we found that actually in the early tests that we did, that we would teach it a particular way. It's different than how students are learning it in their courses. And the students actually end up more confused than less confused. What we then did is we started to align it with particular curriculum, and now what we can do is actually align it with what that particular teacher is teaching, and that made a huge difference because it started to actually be reinforcing. It made it such that we could extend the instructor as opposed to teach a different way that the instructor is teaching, and that resulted in much better outcomes. The sixth, which is a small thing and actually doesn't have a lot to do with AI, is to make this assignable and embed the AI as part of the course as opposed to having being something on the side. One of the things that we're seeing from a lot of our institutions is that many of them are including chatbots in their learning management systems, in their experience for their students, which is great because then the students can ask questions when they want to ask questions. But when we're looking at how do we drive learning outcomes, then having the AI just be optional and sitting off to the side means that only the students that have the motivation to use it will actually use it. And what we found is only the strongest students actually start to turn to it. But if you make it part of the course, then every student out there, particularly the ones that really need it, will get the guidance and get the support that they need. And so that has turned into much more benefit for students because essentially every student is experiencing it in their own way, and are able to actually interact with it. So that drives not only better usage, but it drives better outcomes for the class. The seventh is that you can use AI to surface learning insights that you ordinarily would never see about a student. We can actually really start to look into how a student thinks as opposed to how they answer particular questions. So, one of the things that we now do is that we have a conversation with every single student. So, we ask them certain questions. We'll have a conversation with them about that question and get them to understanding, and then ask them another question and do the same thing. By doing that, we then discovered that we can analyze those conversations and drive really interesting insights that a lot of our instructors never had. We can figure out from the conversation their overall reasoning. And so by doing so, we can figure out misconceptions they have. So, for example, there are many cases where a student will get the answer correct, but then they have a misconception that is hidden underneath it. They got to the answer in a way that was actually not built on the right foundation. But we can actually surface that because we're having that conversation with the student. We can also look at the patterns of confusion that they have. We can look at their shift in understanding as well. So it's not just we're getting their answer, we're actually talking to them. So we can see them initially not understand something and then drive better understanding of things as well. The other interesting thing that the conversation is doing is it's providing psychological safety for the student. So, what we're finding in our systems is that in many cases, students are willing to have conversations with us that they aren't willing to raise their hand and ask about in class, nor are they willing to go talk to the instructor about. But they're able to say to us, "Hey, I really don't understand this. I don't know. Can you help me with this?" Or I thought that this particular concept was this as opposed to that. Those kinds of are the kinds of things we're starting to see, and it provides them a safe environment in which they're able to really kind of use it to get the answers that they want without having to worry about what others think about them. And what this is doing is that these insights are helping both the student and the instructor. So one of the things we found, and this is something we recently did, is that um, we take those insights and we have for a long time surfaced it to the instructor so the instructor can see, hey, this student is struggling with these particular things, or these 15 students are struggling with this particular misconception. What we just did recently is we actually introduced that such that the student sees that. And we can tell the student, this is what we're seeing, and here's evidence, or this is what we saw in the conversation that makes us think that you have that misconception. And that's helping students quite a bit because not only that are they getting kind of an insight of, hey, you got this wrong, but we're going much deeper than that. We're telling them, we think that this is where you might need more work, and here's how, here's why. We can then also do better intervention as a result of that. So if we know that they have that misconception, we can have another conversation with them about that misconception to try to clear that misconception. And so all of this is possible because of the analysis that we can do and because of the fact that we're having a conversation with the student. The eighth lesson that we've learned is that the AI instructor matters. This was a very surprising one for us. So we tried a variety of ways to create that visual experience. And I'll explain that in just a second. And students really engage more when they feel like the instruction is more human. So I'll tell you where we started with this. In the original days, we had this theory that if they felt like they were talking to a real teacher, the student would engage more. So to test that, the way that the original Chiron worked was before a generative AI, and we wanted to have it be like a video where it felt like you're talking to a teacher. So what we did is literally took hundreds of little clips of video of real teachers, and we strung it together with AI. So think of it almost like as a video choose your own adventure book where you're interacting with the AI, different clips of real teachers. And that succeeded beautifully. Students really loved it. They felt like they were actually engaging with a teacher. They were feeling like it was actually extending what their teacher in class was doing. All of that was there. Now, the problem with it is, as you can imagine, it's incredibly labor intensive to do it. So, building a 30-minute lesson took, tens of hours or weeks of time to be able to get everything together and actually create the right lesson. And it was pretty sparse. We could only show this particular video at this time. So where we went after that was that we tried to automate it and we tried to make it such that rather than showing a picture of a person or showing a real teacher, we just showed a slide that had a voiceover over it. That made it much easier to create. We went from weeks to create a 30-minute lesson to literally minutes. Within a few minutes of AI time, you can create a 30-minute lesson. We also saw the engagement start to drop at that point in time. And so what we did was we introduced in an AI avatar. This was something where we were very reluctant about should we actually bring an AI avatar into the experience. But by doing so, we found that it actually really engaged the students quite a bit. We launched this at an online university early last year for the first time in wide scale and saw really, really good results with it. So now we give people that option, and that is the default option to have an AI avatar that's actually explaining this. And we're finding that that's actually engaging students quite a bit more. The ninth lesson is that you need faculty champions to drive adoption. And this is true in any industry, but particularly in education. If you find the ones that are the most enthusiastic to try things, that can then spread to many others. And you want to start that trust small. So, where we've now started to do this is that we will start deployments with one or two faculty innovators and do a small pilot. And by doing that, we have people that are wanting to try this. And in addition to that, we can see does it actually make a difference? And so we'll measure those results. And invariably, what we're actually finding is really strong results out of this. And so then that starts to spread. We'll go from one class to five classes to 20 classes to 50 classes. Those kinds of things are now what's really starting with this. And so but by starting with a few that are willing to co-design and figure things out with us, we can get to better results. And I think that's really true with any technology. How do you find those that are going to be the ones that will know how to implement this in their institution? And the last lesson about implementing AI in learning is it's not about the AI. That is, you're hearing a lot, and we're hearing a lot of institutions that want to figure out how to use AI. But that's kind of the wrong mission. You shouldn't be figuring out how to use AI. You should be focusing on the impact that you want to make, and then figure out how AI can drive that. And there are many ways that AI can drive learning outcomes, but it's not about the AI. So really, now when we go into conversations with institutions, we first start with what are you looking to improve? Are you looking to improve student understanding, pass rates, confidence, retention, or all of the above? And then figure out how does AI help you towards doing that. And there are places actually where AI may not help. And so trying to figure out, what is the problem, what's the outcome you want to get to, and how you get to that outcome has been a key thing. And we've been able to see as a result of that really strong outcomes. So, to summarize, I think the framework that we have realized out of all of this experimentation really boils down to this 6 points. That effective AI for learning should be instructor led. We should be asking the question. Two, it should be visual and interactive. Three, it should be built on learning science and built on the way that we know how students learn. Fourth, it should be aligned with the curriculum that the student is learning right now. Fifth, it should be embedded into the coursework so that it feels like it's part of the course. And sixth, it should be measured by learning outcomes. And if you follow this, you can actually lead to much better learning outcomes for students than if you were to just let them use AI like they're using AI right now. So I'll give you a little bit of background about what we're doing to build on these principles. And so what you see here on the right hand side is an example of Chiron Learning, where we start with a short video lesson that we generate. We then ask the student a question that goes with that lesson, and then have a conversation with them. What's interesting is we've now seen that the length of the video matters, that as we start to get past like a 3 minute chunk without having interaction, the engagement starts to drop off. So we'll have about 2 or 3 minutes of explanations with the student, and then we'll have a conversation with them. You can see the conversation that's there can be done in a lot of ways. You can talk back and forth to the system. You can type. We also have visuals that are a part of it. So you can ask questions. You as an instructor can ask a question about a visual, and then the AI will lead the student through that visual. We ask the question as we talked about before. So we'll explain a little bit, and then we'll go and ask a question about it, and then we'll have this kind of guided practice and feedback around it. The learning science is built into the AI, both in terms of how we produce this lesson, as well as how we have the conversation with the students. And so we've taken a lot of the best theories of learning science that are out there and implemented that into the AI. And it's aligned to the faculty content through a few ways. One, you can put in the content to start off with, and we'll build this module around it. However, the other really important thing is that we don't just generate something and put it in front of the student. We generate it and we put it in front of the faculty and the instructors. They can then tweak it and control any element of it such that it becomes an authentic extension of them. And then they can deploy it, to their students through their learning management system such that it feels like it's part of their course. What we want to make sure is that it is very much aligned with how that faculty is teaching that particular subject, and they have the control to be able to do it. So, as a result of this, we're seeing really, really strong results. I'm going to give you three examples of this. Miami-Dade College, we have been helping students in a variety of courses. We started with our English course, and we've now extended to psychology, math, computer science. And they have about 6 to 8 of these sessions, or interactive sessions per lesson, and they have several of these lessons in a particular course. And one, the students have been very, very engaged. We found that 93% of the students have found this content to be engaging, which is 39% higher than the content that they had before. And then we saw a 6% increase in pass rate with students in some of the courses where they've used Chiron now for quite a while. Another private college, we've been helping them in their school of health, and helping them with areas around things like medical coding, for example, things that they're going to be using in their career very quickly. And so this is, well over 1,000 students that are now using this, and these scenario type modules that are there, where they can practice different scenarios. Here's a scenario you have. What would you do in this particular scenario? And it increased the persistence of the program as well. So we saw 9% increase in pass rate as a result of this. And we saw a 7-point gain in their assignments that they took after using the Chiron lessons. And so you could think of this as almost an entire grade level increase in what they're seeing. What is really interesting, though, is that as you talk to the students, and you can see the quote from one of the students on the side, they are really feeling like they're understanding this better. They're engaging more, they're understanding this, and as a result of that, the results show. With another online university, we have many thousands of students that are now using this in a few of their courses. And we saw a huge increase in engagement. Whereas with other video modules, they were spending a few minutes in those modules. With Chiron, they were spending 22 minutes per module. We saw an increase in their second attempt pass rates. And so students that originally were taking a course, when they used a Chiron module to then understand the places where they were not getting a particular concept, we saw a huge increase in their pass rate. And then another interesting thing, and we're seeing this across all colleges, is that we're seeing high usage when faculty are unavailable. And this is actually making it such that this works really well with faculty. Faculty can't be there between 11 p.m. and 4 a.m., but that's when a lot of students are actually taking the material, and it helps the students in those off hours. So we should not be looking to AI to automate education. AI is something that can augment education, and that's really what we want to aim for. How do we take the institutions that are there that are able to deliver great education to students and make it even stronger, make it even more personal? And so we want to be able to improve how students learn and then create that access to learning such that each student gets the personal experience that they need that is an extension of their instructor. And that's really what we not only what we're aiming to do, but what we feel like AI should be aiming to do in education. So I really thank you for all the time that you've given us. And if you are interested in learning more about Chiron, please feel free to visit us at chironlearning.com. You can contact us at contact@chironlearning.com or schedule a demo with us, and we can show you a little bit more in action and show you kind of how this can actually fit into your context as well. And hopefully, as a result of that, we can learn together. We are just at the very beginning as an industry of figuring out how AI impacts industries overall and particularly education. And so we need to be able to work together to drive students to better understanding. But if we do the right things, we can open up much better pathways to education to many, many more students. And that's really what we want to do. Well, thank you. We really appreciate your time. Thank you for being here. And please feel free to reach out to us for more. Appreciate it all. Talk to you soon.